You know that moment when your bank app buzzes with a notification, and instead of that jolt of dread, you feel nothing? Not because you stopped caring, but because whatever it says, you already know you're fine. That's not $20,000. That's what comes after. Most people think $20,000 is the finish line of financial anxiety. They hit it, they exhale, and they assume the hard part is over. But here's what nobody tells you. Crossing $20,000 doesn't end the transformation. It starts a second one, a deeper one. And this second shift changes things $20,000 alone never could. That number is $50,000. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people build wealth almost effortlessly, while others stay stuck no matter how hard they try. If you want to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface of your bank account instead of just hoping things improve, hit subscribe. And if this video reframes how you see your own progress, drop a like so more people find it. Now let me ask you something. If $20,000 already changes your relationship with money, your career, your confidence, what's left? What could possibly change even more? Everything, actually. Because $20,000 didn't fix your finances. It fixed your foundation. And a foundation is only the beginning of what you can build. Think back to that boulder on the hill. Getting it moving from a dead stop, that's $20,000. That's the brutal part, the part most people quit during. But once the boulder crests the hill and starts rolling downhill, something people don't expect happens next. It doesn't roll at a constant speed. It accelerates. The further it rolls, the faster it goes. And the faster it goes, the harder it becomes to stop. $50,000 is where you stop pushing the boulder entirely and start realizing it's now pulling you. Here's the psychological piece, and it's different from what happened at $20,000. At $20,000, your brain exited survival mode. That was huge. But survival mode isn't the only mode holding people back. There's a second, quieter mode that kicks in right after, something psychologists sometimes call maintenance mode. You're not scared anymore, but you're not exactly growth-oriented either. You're just stable, comfortable, and comfort, weirdly, can be its own trap. A lot of people plateau right here, not because they run out of money, but because they run out of urgency. What breaks people out of maintenance mode is momentum they can actually see. And that's exactly what starts happening around $50,000. Let's do the math, because the math is where this gets wild. Say you're still saving that same $1,000 a month at an 8% return, the exact habits that got you to $20,000. Getting from $20,000 to $30,000 takes around 9 months. Getting from $30,000 to $40,000 takes about 8 months. And the jump from $40,000 to $50,000? Just over 7 months. Compare that to the 19 months it took to build your very first $20,000, and you can see it. The same discipline, the same monthly contribution, the same risk level, but the timeline keeps collapsing in on itself. Now here's the part that made me sit up the first time I really understood it. At $50,000 earning a conservative 8%, your money alone is generating $4,000 a year without you lifting a finger. That's not pocket change anymore. That's most people's monthly take-home pay showing up automatically, year after year, whether you work overtime or not, whether you get a raise or not, whether your job even still exists or not. That's the moment $50,000 changes things $20,000 never could. At $20,000, your money was a safety net. At $50,000, your money becomes a second income. And a second income changes decisions in ways a safety net simply can't. A safety net stops disasters. A second income creates leverage. Let's go back to those scenarios from before, but push them further. Your car needs repairs. At $20,000, that's a minor inconvenience. At $50,000, you're not just covering it, you're already thinking about whether it's time to sell the car altogether and go without one for a while, banking the difference. Your rent goes up. At $20,000, you absorb it. At $50,000, you start seriously running numbers on whether buying makes more sense than renting, because you finally have enough for a real down payment without gutting your safety net. Your friend's business pitch. At $20,000, you consider throwing in $500. Cautiously? At $50,000, you can consider $5,000 and still sleep fine that night, because losing it wouldn't touch your foundation. This is where people start hearing the phrase "your money works for you" and actually believing it, because now it's not a saying, it's a line item they can see in their own account. But here's what almost nobody talks about, and it's the real reason: $50. 000 matters more than people expect. It's the threshold where you stop being a saver and start becoming an investor psychologically. At $20,000, you were still mentally treating your money like a stockpile, something to protect. At $50,000, the math forces a mindset shift. You start asking different questions. Not, how do I avoid losing this? But how do I make this grow faster? You start paying attention to asset allocation instead of just deposit amounts. You start reading about tax-advantaged accounts instead of just comparing savings account interest rates. The questions upgrade, because the stakes finally justify the attention. There's also a career shift that goes further than the $20,000 unlocked. Remember, walking away money at $50,000? That number stretches from months of runway to potentially a year or more, depending on your expenses. And a year of runway doesn't just mean you can survive a layoff. It means you can survive a career pivot. You can afford to take the lower-paying job that teaches you the skill that doubles your income in 3 years. You can afford 6 months of building something on the side before it needs to pay you back. At $20,000, you had options. At $50,000, you have room to experiment. Here's the part that stings a little, though, because I've watched it happen to people over and over. Just like with the first $20,000, this is exactly where people sabotage themselves. Except this time, the sabotage looks smarter. It doesn't look like blowing it on a flashy purchase. It looks like getting comfortable. It looks like thinking, I've made it, I can ease off now. People stop optimizing their savings rate. They stop paying attention to fees eating into their returns. They start treating $50,000 as a plateau instead of a launch pad. And because the growth from here forward is so much faster than it used to be, easing off now costs you disproportionately more than easing off at $20,000 ever would have. Let's put a number on that mistake. If you keep contributing $1,000 a month after hitting $50,000, at 8% growth, you'd cross $100,000 in about 4 years. If you get comfortable and drop your contributions to $300 a month, thinking the growth will carry it, that same milestone takes almost 7 years. Same starting point. Same market conditions. 3 extra years, gone, because of a mindset shift nobody warned you about. And this is where the irony from the car conversation gets even sharper. Remember the person financing a new car every few years, quietly bleeding 6 figures over a lifetime? At $50,000 in investments, you're not just avoiding that trap anymore. You're actively watching the gap between person who finances everything and person who invested instead widen in real time every single month, whether you're paying attention or not. The person with the car payment is still asking, can I afford this payment? You've graduated to asking, does this purchase interrupt my compounding? That's a completely different financial universe, even though on the surface, you might drive the exact same street in the exact same city. Here's the honest truth about $50,000, it won't feel as emotional as $20,000 did. Crossing $20,000 feels like relief, like finally exhaling. Crossing $50,000 feels quieter, almost anticlimactic, because you're not scared anymore by the time you get there. But quiet doesn't mean small. Quiet is what compounding sounds like right before it gets loud. The wealthy don't feel excited about their money every day. They just trust it. And that trust is built exactly at moments like this one. Moments that don't feel dramatic, but change everything underneath the surface. So if you're sitting somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 right now, feeling like the hardest part is behind you, you're right, and you're not done. The habits that got you here don't get to retire yet. They're just getting warmed up. Keep pushing. The boulder isn't slowing down. It's just getting started.